What's going on, everybody? It's Justin Gazaba, and this is Living and Moving to Seattle, Washington. This is the channel that gives you all the nitty-gritty details on what it's like to live, work, eat, sleep, play right here in the Pacific Northwest, the Emerald City, the Puget Sound, all over from, well, we talk mostly about Seattle, but from Anacortes to Gig Harbor, where, everywhere in between, Federal Way, Des Moines. We want to do a really good job for you and help you decide if this is the right area for you. If you're making the move, reach out to us, shoot us a call, give us a text. We're helping people make the move all the time. We have people reaching out to us, so don't feel like some kind of crazy thing to reach out. All our contact info is below. And in this video, we are going to talk about the pros and cons 2023. Just an updated thing as things progress. The whole year's gone by since we made our 2022 video, and I want to give you guys some updates of just the pros and cons of things as we see them now. And so if you haven't already, hit that like, hit that subscribe, tap that notification bell so that you know when we release a new video. We try to bring them out to you weekly here to get you all the details and information that you're looking for. So let's get straight into the video. So as you know, I've got my notes, so if I'm looking down, I'm checking my notes because I want to make sure to stay on track for you. So the number one thing, we're just going to hit pros first. So we're going to do pros, we're going to do cons, and then we're going to riff a little bit on each. So in the news lately, not sure when this video is going to come out, but we have heard a lot of talks about recession and layoffs and these major tech companies doing layoffs. But here in the Seattle market, we actually have a really, really strong job market. When we looked at the big layoffs from the tech firms, Google and Amazon, we saw about 1,800 people, I think it was, at Microsoft locally got laid off. And I want to say it was only about 300 or so people, 380 or so people that got laid off locally from Amazon. You got to remember, these companies are major international companies, and when they do layoffs of their workforce, it's not just in one location. It's spread out over different locations. So here in the Seattle market, we've got a super strong job market, very, very tech-centric market with high-paying jobs. And there's a ton of different companies here, from Disney, Google, Tableau, Salesforce, Microsoft, Amazon. The list goes on, right? You could look up what companies. Nintendo, a headquarter here in the Seattle area. Expedia, right? So there's a ton of companies, and the talent pool. Although we do see layoffs, hear talks of upcoming recessions because of what the Fed is doing. We're still seeing a lot of strong job growth, and even with the layoffs that we have seen, those companies all did a lot of hiring back in 2021, 2022. And even with the layoffs, there's still more people employed by those companies here in the Northwest, here in Seattle, than there were prior to the pandemic. So even though with those layoffs, those companies are still growing. So you got to remember that. Number two on the list, the pro, is high quality education. Seattle still has amazing, great schools. Some of the best schools are on the east side. North Shore School District, Lake Washington School District, Bellevue School District, right? Even parts of Renton. Renton probably doesn't do enough credit. I should do more videos about Renton, but there's parts of Renton and Renton that are in the Issaquah School District. There's parts of Issaquah that are in the Bellevue School District, right? So even, and I share this with folks, even if you don't have kids, not planning on having kids, not thinking about kids, you still need to think about kids because it impacts the value of your purchase to be in these great schools. And there are a ton of private schools here as well that hit high marks. So we still have really, really strong, great schools in the area. In Bellevue, to speak to that, they have seen declines in some of their enrollment. Now, schools get funded based off of enrollment. A lot of those parents move to those areas to be close to those schools. Can't remember the school off the top of my head, but they do plan on closing a couple elementary schools out there, a couple of different schools. But they're working through this process, right? So super unfortunate to see that, but in a COVID era, we did see lower enrollment. So just be cognizant, of the areas that you're moving to, that you're thinking about. So if you're thinking about moving into those areas on the border of different schools, you're going to find that you want to be a little more into that district versus right on the border, because that border could shift and change. Number three pro, same as before, like beautiful scenery. My goodness, I talk probably way too much about clouds and rain and, try to give my honest opinion about what it's like here. But when people move here, I've got people that have moved up from California. It does not bother them at all. It is like I don't know if it's just like a trend to talk about how cloudy and rainy it is, but I want you to have a clear perspective. We have high clouds, filtered sunlight, the long gray for a long period of time, but just coming out of January, we had a ton of sunny days. I didn't even have to put the rain jacket on the dog to go take a walk, right? But we will get those big rains when that comes through, and so you'll be able to, you will see rain when you get here, right? But beautiful, beautiful scenery. You know, if you're a hiker, mountain biker, kayaker, climber, even if you surf, there's all that is right here, able to get after. Mount Rainier National Park is beautiful, but you can get, if you're moving to Seattle, you're 45 minutes away from the Issaquah Alps, as it were, Poo Poo Point, Mailbox Peak, even down into Snoqualmie. It's easy to get to, tons and tons and tons of backpacking opportunities, hiking opportunities that way, and it is just gorgeous. Obviously, Seattle is right on the water. The Seattle skyline with the Great Wheel right there, right in Elliott Bay. We've got Lake Union, Green Lake, Lake Washington, Lake Sammamish. I mean, my goodness, the views and the scenery is bar none what draws people here time and again. And then you get those weather windows where if you're like Kara and I, weather changes lives, man. You get a good sun break, you watch the weather, you are getting outside to do your best to get out into the backcountry and have a go at it. So still a pro, still beautiful, that hasn't changed. Another pro for the Seattle area, even Bellevue, even Renton, even, Des Moines, we have easy access to light rail now. It's getting better and better. We're about to get the ring, a loop out over into Bellevue to make it really, really easy and convenient to take light rail over there. But the reason I bring that up is because we have great museums. Down in Tacoma, we have the Chihuly Museum. We've got the LeMay Auto Museum in Tacoma. We've got the Seattle Art Museum here in Seattle. Bellevue has their own art museum. We've got the Benaroya Hall and the ballet and everything. So a tremendous art scene if you're into that. If that speaks to you and you want to get out, or you just want to go to an opera because you've never been and it's worth going and can be super fun, definitely worth to put on the list to check out, because bar none, we have top really great arts and symphony and all that right here in Seattle. So the number 5 pro is a public transportation. Now, if okay, so I've talked about this before, but we've got Elliott Bay, we've got Seattle, we've got the Fremont Cut, we've got Lake Union, we've got Green Lake to the north and Lake Sammamish. We have Lake Washington, right, with the bridges, the 520 floating bridge, the biggest floating bridge in the world, I think, goes across, is the 520 bridge. And then we've got the I-90 floating bridge, right? We've got all this water east to west. But north to south is pretty easy. We've got decent bus routes. The light rail is getting better and better. If you're coming from a place that doesn't have transit, Seattle is it's like night and day. Seattle has great transit. But if you're coming from a place that has amazing transit, you can feel like it's a little lackluster. So having traveled, my grandpa lives in South Jersey, really close to Philadelphia, amazing trains, amazing transit, really convenient and easy. So I always make that comparison because that's the other big city that I'm familiar with a little bit, is Philadelphia. And I don't think that the Seattle transit stacks up. But if you're coming from, other places on the West Coast, or, somewhere in the middle, I've never experienced Chicago. I have to imagine they have great mass transit. But Seattle does have really good transit. I'll probably put it in the somewhere between the 60th and 80th percentile of great transit. But it's hard to say. I don't know what your experience is. So I usually kind of talk crap about Seattle, but and their transit. But it's pretty great. Like if you're coming from Portland or whatever, it's much more vast and getting better all the time. So number 6 on the list is yes. Now, we're going to say it's a pro. Maybe you think it's a con. I don't know, but Seattle's pretty stinking progressive, right? We have a lot of inclusivity in the city. Capitol Hill, the neighborhood. Some people call it a gayborhood because it is so LGBTQ plus friendly. It is, a lot of people in the area truly feel like it is a very inclusive area. Could they do more? Sure. Is that I don't know how you feel about that, but Seattle really is kind of the, a very, very coastal liberal town. That's the way that it trends. You can see that way. But that said, Seattle elected a Republican mayor. There is some change that. So you've got to kind of take the good with the bad, depending on how you see it. And I think a lot of people were fed up with the way that the city was being run under, the other side of that political spectrum, because we saw the streets get dirtier and things get worse. And I don't know if that's a consequence of politics or policy or how that is, but we are seeing things get cleaned up. And, a lot of people come to the area and they feel very, very included. And, the diversity here is such that, the east side there's more foreign language or second languages spoke on the east side, I think, than anywhere else. It just is a very diverse and inclusive area, and you'll find that here, depending on what neighborhood you move to, it is really, really kind of, like I say, progressive, inclusive. It really just makes it a welcoming place for a lot of different folks from different backgrounds. Okay, so the other pro on the list is, and this is, feel free to, whatever you think. If you're watching this, you live locally or you used to live here, let me know what you think. Seattle gets touted as having a great food scene, but I have heard from a lot of other people that there just really isn't that good of a food scene here. So I think it really depends on where you're coming from. If you're coming from, Vancouver, BC, and you're used to the Chinatown up there and that food scene, or if you're coming from, the East Coast, New York, or your big cities, on the East Coast, or Chicago, has always been kind of a culinary capital, an area for that. You might feel differently, but if you're coming from a smaller town, you might be like, holy cow, look at the food here. I have heard it both ways, but we have great, Michelin star restaurants. We have great startups, great places in the area that are doing new and fun work in the kitchen, and it's definitely always rotating and seeing what happens, because some places stick, some places don't, but it definitely has I think enough options to keep you satisfied. Again, I've said this in other videos. Seattle is not a 24-hour city; it's an 18-hour city, right? So a lot of people move here. They've heard Seattle's great, but it is a little bit quieter than your bigger cities. I always talk about Chicago and New York because those are 24-hour cities. But Seattle, one of the complaints I've seen from people that come out here is that the breweries close early. Breweries are closing at 10 o'clock. No, they're not staying open super late. Restaurants on the weekends are open, and you can be at one part of town at a restaurant, hard to get to another part of town to go do something else. The city just gets a little bit quieter in the evening, but a lot of great opportunities to get out, try different, renowned sushi places, renowned oyster bars, renowned, different restaurants here in Seattle. So there definitely is a foodie scene here in Seattle. All right, so now that we've done some pros, I'm going to get into some cons for 2023. And what we've seen over the last little while is a lot of people moving to Seattle, which is great. We see a lot of growth. But because Seattle's on an isthmus, because there's only so much land and there's a ton of lakes, the cost of living, the cost of owning a home here is a little bit expensive. Now, depending on what article you read and when you read it, at times, Seattle has been noted as being more expensive than New York and being more expensive than San Francisco, because you got to take the wages into consideration for the price as well. And so the other thing that I think about when we make these comparisons to these different cities, it's hard to know what industry are you working in? What's your pay grade going to look like? How is that going to look against Seattle during, the early times, in the pandemic when people were making a shift? We saw a lot of people from California, and we always do. It's always the joke. Everybody's always talking about, these Californians moving to Washington. It's been happening forever. It's always been a thing. There's even books in the 1800s that talk about Californians moving up north. So It just is the way that it is. Don't get it twisted. It's not like they're coming for you or whatever. It's fine. It's okay. It's always been a thing. But the cost of living with, we have higher property taxes. I hear people in New Jersey talk about high property taxes and we have high sales tax, 10.1%, 10.2% on our sales tax, right? And so between property taxes and sales taxes, that's where the city and the state gets most of its revenue to do the services that they do provide, and that's where that money comes from. And because we don't have, an income tax, all that money comes from there, and so we do see that as a differentiator than you might find in other states and other cities. When it comes to housing, even transportation, the cost of the bus or maintaining a vehicle, we do have some of the lowest electricity prices in the nation, so you can actually do really well by having an electric vehicle here. If that's if that feels too progressive for you, Ford's coming out with a pickup truck that's electric. Maybe that's more up your alley, but it definitely can make a lot more sense to have an electric vehicle here in Seattle because of that low electricity price. So number 9 on the list, the con, we're going back to traffic. As people are getting back to work and going back to the office, we are seeing a big increase of companies requesting and demanding that their employees come back to the office to work. They're paying for those leases, they're paying for those buildings. They want you to get those butts back in the seats. And that is just contributing to traffic more and more. It's worse than it was pre-pandemic. We are seeing like a ton of traffic. There's no longer a rush hour. It's like rush hours from 6:30 in the morning to 10:30 in the afternoon, 11 o'clock. And then there's a lunch break, and then that gets wild. And I-5 is a mess. So you definitely want to get your act together on what your commute's going to look like. If you can take public transit, if you can ride your bike to work, if you can live close enough to work that maybe you're only 15-20 minutes away, but that does impact where you can live and what that looks like. I know a lot of folks, they try to balance, hey, I only need to be at the office 2 or 3 days a week. I got a hybrid thing that we're doing, so we want to live further outside the city so that we can have a little bit more yard, a little bit more privacy, a little bit more room to breathe. And it's worth it to me to spend that hour commuting into, and home, there and back, for those 2 to 3 days a week. Now, if they had to go into downtown Seattle or into downtown Bellevue or make that commute every single day, they might choose differently. But there still are a ton of people that choose to make that commute because they just want a little more house, a little more yard, a little more room to breathe. But definitely something to watch for is the traffic, right? You could, somebody had commented on one of the videos about going 1 mile in 1 hour as they were commuting up towards Everett and Linwood on I-5 up there. So definitely can get pretty backed up. Number 10 con on the list, we've talked about it before, but it's weather, okay? So you can really get some down in the dumps, January, some of that seasonal affective disorder where you're not feeling it, where things just aren't working out, where it's dark, especially when we set the clocks back and it doesn't get light outside until after 8 and the sun goes down before 4. That winter section, that winter time, we've got all the clouds and it's misty and rainy and cloudy and there's no sunlight. Maybe some filtered sunlight come through, can really do some wear and tear on you. And a lot of people, the best way to overcome that is to get out, go bouldering, join a rock climbing gym, go do some yoga, drink lots of water, take your vitamin D, or do something. Get yourself out of your house so you're not just going from living and working at your house, living in that box, and then driving in your car in that box to drive over to work to get into that box so that you can hang out in all your different boxes, drive back and forth, maybe take a walk when it's not raining, or you can walk around your box, you go back into your box. And then for those of folks that live and work in their home, right, that timeline, those clouds, do you live, do you work from home or do you live at work, right? So you got to start setting up clear boundaries, get after yourself so that you can have some good mental health and stuff like that. Now, when I make it sound like that, I'm giving all this, advice, I make it sound like it's terrible, but for people up here that have grown up here, it's no problem. People that move, sometimes they have a problem, but you just keep moving, keep after it. And just know that when the sun breaks, when you when the rain stops, you get out and you make the most of it. Like I said earlier, weather changes lives. Okay, so I talked about it a little bit with high cost of living, but there's also high taxes. Super con, we just keep seeing taxes. You know, I saw my home value increase over the last year, so my taxes went up, and then we see, you know, every little while we're seeing the sales tax increase, so there's another thing to think about. It's definitely a con, you know, but again, we don't have income tax, so there's the other side of that. Number 13 on the list, big con, is the parking situation here in Seattle. As Seattle grows, as people, you know, more and more people move here, the affordable housing that's being built are those units that don't have garages or off-street parking, because that takes away from square footage and living space. So the city has made a choice to say, hey, you know, you don't have to build a garage, you don't have to have off-street parking. And then they'll build, you know, 6 townhouses where one house used to be with a garage. They'll get rid of all that and they'll put in 6 townhouses, and there'll be no parking. So there'll just be street parking. Forever and ever and ever, it used to be, you know, Capitol Hill was the most connected via transit. It was very much a place that you could live without a car. There are sections of Fremont and Ballard that feel that way. Light rail isn't expected to hit Ballard for a number of years, but when it does, I think a lot of people will choose to get rid of their cars because of that, because they'll have good access to the light rail and good access to transit. Number 14 on the list is crowdedness, overcrowdedness here in Seattle. One of my biggest complaints in Seattle is that they don't mandate that the sidewalks are twice as wide as they are. You can barely walk down a sidewalk and have people pass you on both sides. If you look at major metropolitan cities, you know, the sidewalks are twice as wide as what we have here. We have like 3.5 foot wide sidewalks or something like this. And so when, you know, if you're in Ballard, if you're in Capitol Hill, if you're even in Ravenna or downtown Seattle, the sidewalks are only, you know, they're not very, you know, maybe it's 6 feet. I didn't get my measuring tape out, but they are narrow. So, and I know this because when I walk the dog, I have to kind of get out of the way to let people pass. Otherwise you're running into people. It just isn't built in a way that would allow for the type of growth that we're seeing. We're seeing a tremendous amount of growth. Like I said, you know, Seattle's changed that zoning. They're knocking down houses. One house goes away, 6 townhouses come up, right? So that is definitely something to think about as you move in. I've talked about it in other videos. If you want to live in Ballard or Fremont or Wallingford or, you know, these areas where, especially Ballard, you are going to be, chances are if you buy an older home, a Craftsman home, a Tudor home, a Foursquare in that area, your neighbor may be zoned for residential small lots. And what that means is that house could go away and become townhouses. And so you're taking a risk by moving into that area that you're going to be in an area that's under construction. And this is the case with a lot of neighborhoods in Seattle as that crowdedness, as that density grows. So that's the pros and cons for 2023. I hope you got a kick out of that video. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, tap that notification bell. We're helping people make that move out here all the time. I want to give you a clear understanding of what it's like. I might, you know, personally, I might lean in to some of the cons a little bit heavier than others, but I want you to have a clear perspective. You know, it's not like it's any of the things that I've said have just said, oh man, now I gotta leave Seattle because I hate it so much. I just want to give you guys a clear perspective of what it's like to live, work, play, eat and sleep right here in Seattle in the Puget Sound. Like I said, reach out to us. We're helping people make the move all the time, and we will see you in the next video. Talk to you.